What type of rent protections is the city of Los Angeles enacting as a result of the LA wildfires? And how does it affect both tenants and landlords? That's number one. And number two, one of the biggest questions that we're being asked by everybody these days who lives in Los Angeles County is, where are they disposing of all that ash and toxic debris? We're going to talk about both of those on today's video, so stay tuned. Hey guys, Scott Himelstein with the Scott Himelstein Group. All right, so on today's video, right, I wanted to touch base on two different things as a result of the wildfires. And number one is a question we're getting asked a lot by a lot of our landlords as well as tenants. And that is, how are the wildfires affecting tenants, right? And I think from the tenant perspective, as you've heard a lot in the news, the law enforcement is trying to really crack down on those who are price gouging, right? And if a rental was previously on the market before the fires took place and having it go up in price 150%, well, that's actually going to be illegal. And so since the wildfires began, there's been almost 1,000 reported incidents that the authorities actually are aware of and that they're looking into of price gouging. And you've actually had 2 arrests from. And we're going to get into that a little later. But one of the things that's resulted as a result of all the wildfires is the tenant protection. So especially for those who were renting in the fire areas, the fire affected areas and the surrounding areas, right? Because from the tenant perspective, you have to think about it like, okay, well, hey, maybe you have gardeners, you have nannies, service providers for a lot of people who lived in these fire disaster areas. And now their income is down 50% or more. Right. And so it's extremely difficult for people like them to be able to pay. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. Now, look, I understand from the landlord perspective, too, that a lot of these landlords, they're small landlords. Yes, there are some of them that own several multi-residential properties, but most of them don't really typically. And so, from there, it's very similar to COVID, where I don't think it's fair for the landlords to have everything on their backs as housing providers as a result of this. So one of the things that happened last week was that the city scrapped. They took it off the table, that they had on the table that they were basically going to have a citywide moratorium on rent increases. And that really would have been detrimental to the entire city, I think. Some may disagree with that, but I do think that you probably have to have some type of middle ground. So another ordinance that's actually going to be enacted is basically for protecting tenants, is allowing them to welcome unauthorized additional tenants or pets displaced in the wildfires. And that was also approved by the city council about a week ago. And this makes sense too, because, a lot of times people are renting and now they're going to have to take in family members and other pets. So, if you're a landlord, yes, maybe you don't want more people living in the household, but I also agree, you can't have people that are displaced, not having a place to go. And if they have a place to go, it'll actually ease the burden somewhat on the housing crisis that we have. All right, so that's number one. And then also, if you go back to February 4th here of this year, you had Governor Gavin Newsom. He issued an expanding rental housing price gouging protections, right, to the Los Angeles area, the fire areas, on leases of any length. And rather than them limiting to leases of 1 year or less, and this order really responds to the reports of landlords offering leases of 366 days to bypass price gouging restrictions. While not expressly addressed in the executive order, it appears that this expansion of protections will probably remain in effect beyond the anticipated March 8th, 2025 expiration of the rental housing price gouging restrictions imposed by the governor's office, that declaration of a state of emergency, thus keeping the suspension in effect for the duration of any local emergency declaration. So the governor declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles and Ventura counties on January 7th, 2025, due to the Los Angeles area wildfires. And that automatically triggered a penal code, the state's anti-price gouging law. And that law caps rent increases at no more than 10% above pre-emergency levels. And these protections apply to existing tenants and at unit turnover. So the violations can result in penalties, including fines up to $10,000 in imprisonment for up to a year, or both, along with any type of civil liabilities that may come along with it. And additionally, the governor's office, they had an executive order that exempts single-family homes with 4 or more bedrooms in specific zip codes from rent increase limitations under that same penal code, provided they were not rented or offered for rent within 1 year before the emergency declaration. And to qualify, the property, one, had to be vacant and not offered for rent within 1 year prior to January 7th, 2025. It had to be a single-family home with 4 or more bedrooms, and on the financial side, it had to have a small area fiscal year, basically fair market rent, the small area fiscal year 2025 fair market rent as calculated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development of at least $5,500 for 4-bedroom units. And again, it basically had to be in and around the zip codes that were affected by the fires. However, local anti-price gouging ordinances that cap rent increases on qualifying properties may actually still apply. So therefore, I always recommend that if you're a landlord, consult with your attorney or the local authorities when it comes to what you're able to price your home out when it comes to rental restrictions. So that state of emergency and its accompanying price gouging protections, they're set to expire on March 8th, 2025. But my guess, based on what I've seen before, and when it comes to other disasters, and especially the pandemic in 2020, expect that to be extended. All right, so that's number one. Let's talk about where all the debris is going to be taken, as right now we're in the biggest cleanup that the EPA has ever really seen, especially when it comes to any type of disaster, right? And you're talking about toxins from car batteries, just to name a few, right? That's kind of one of the first things that comes to my mind is car batteries. Like, that's what everyone's talking about, right? But all the debris and everything that burned to the ground, right? There are a lot of toxins in there. And I think this was always going to be a big question, as you have politicians that want to fast track everything, which is great. At the same time, it's like, where's it going to go? So the 30-day deadline to clear the toxic debris from the Los Angeles wildfires has sparked health concerns in the communities near the burn scars, right? And so a lot of politicians, you have to wonder again if they're actually thinking forwardly, because I think you might have some consequence. And this is what a lot of people throughout LA County are worried about, as they're basically going to have areas that they're going to dump into in 7 different landfills, essentially, right? And so, just take from Azusa City, right? That Azusa, the city of Azusa, the city council updated residents about one of the staging areas, which is on federal land along the San Gabriel River, right? And on the San Gabriel River watershed. And this area has been designated as a temporary processing site for toxic household waste, such as paint, propane tanks, lithium-ion batteries from Altadena, right? And so, while the EPA says there shouldn't be any issue, they're covering the whole area. They have mats, they have a thick plastic liner, everything's in double-lined plastic bags. They put it down on a covered table and sort it into lined boxes so the material never touches the ground. It's normal, I think, for residents to have legitimate concerns about this. So on the one hand, the pressures to repopulate the burn areas are really great now from all areas of the local and the federal government. I think everybody understands that. But the same conversation regarding the hazardous materials from the Palisades fire happened during a city meeting in Malibu. And the way that they figure out if there's a health risk is really if people start getting sick, right? Whether it be from a landfill, a gas leak, whatever it may be. And so I think the question that a lot of people are asking is, because there's so few people living in the fire-affected areas right now, it's kind of hard to decipher if what's really taking place is actually the right move. No one's really going to know until probably years down the line. right? So, I've heard a lot of experts say that you probably need over 20 acres of staging areas, right? And the FEMA regional director, Michael Montgomery, said that you definitely need over 20 acres of staging areas, and they just don't have that right now. So there are 7 sites that have been approved, and they're landfills and recycling centers. These are the Simi Valley landfill. That's a landfill that accepts non-hazardous waste. You have the Azusa land reclamation site. That's a site that accepts waste. The Badlands sanitary landfill. That's all the way out in Moreno Valley. That accepts waste. The Calabasas landfill, that's a landfill in Agoura that accepts waste. The El Sobrante landfill, that's all the way in Corona. You have Lamb Canyon landfill, that's in Beaumont. And then, of course, you have Sunshine Canyon landfill, basically up in the North Granada Hills area, that accepts waste. And so I think the question is, I hear a lot of people say, well, if you don't like it, you shouldn't have moved next to a landfill. But a lot of people didn't maybe not know that, right? And some of these landfills weren't active 20, 30 years ago, especially Sunshine Canyon. And so I actually went to the Granada Hills North Neighborhood Council meeting a couple weeks ago, and as they were talking about what they are going to do with the landfill as allowing that debris. And a lot of neighbors were concerned about it, right? During the public comments portion of that meeting, a lot of neighbors got up and expressed their concern. Again, because you have winds and other things that people were concerned of how that's going to affect them health-wise. But at the same time, nobody else is going to be accepting our debris and toxic waste. No one wants it in other parts of the country. So it's not an easy fix. And I understand both sides of the coin. So I would love to hear what you think about it, that should all this toxic waste be dumped in our landfills here in Los Angeles and Riverside County and Ventura counties, the surrounding areas, or, should it be taken somewhere else, if it can even be taken else? And what would your concerns be, or do you think it's the right move? Let us know what you think about the tenant protections as well. Is it enough, or does it go too far? We'd love to hear your comments down below. And as always, any questions about real estate, reach out 818-396-3311, 818-396-3311. And thanks for watching our video.